At this point, you should have traced all of your lettering or used your Illustrator file to create shape layers of all of your letters. So now we're ready to animate. So I'm going to go down to the E. I'm just going to solo this layer so there's not as much going on screen. And I'm going to go toggle down, go to Add Trim Paths, and then toggle that down. And then I have these start and end values. So I'm just going to set a keyframe about there for the end to be at 100%, go back to 0, and then drag the end all the way to 0%. And you can see the E is animating in the wrong direction. So I'm just going to go into my group, go to my path, and right here you see these two little arrow directions. I'm going to switch which one is selected, and now it's going to animate in the right direction. So you might have noticed this is very similar to what I showed you when I showed the word lettering. So we're going to actually animate this the exact same way. But you might be wondering how we're going to get that texture to show up. We're going to end up using masks, but first let's just worry about animating these letters on. So what I can do is just select these trim paths, Command C to copy them, go into my next layer, I'll solo that too so I can see it, and hit Command V to paste. If I hit U on my keyboard, I can see any keyframes that layer has, and so now I have both the E and the X animating on. And then I'm just going to stagger these keyframes so that they start a little bit later. And this is a shorter line, so I probably don't need the animation to last quite as long. So I'm just going to drag that to about there. Then I'm going to solo the P and paste the trim paths, hit U to see the keyframes, and let's see what that looks like. So my P has two pieces, and you can see that they're both getting the trim path effects at the same time. So if I don't want that to happen, say I want one to animate after the other, I can change this trim path multiple shapes from simultaneously to individually, and now you'll see that the belly of the P animates first and then the line. And the line's actually going not the way that I want it to, so it looks like that's group 2. I'll just change the direction, and that looks alright. Another thing I can do is if I want these to kind of be staggered, like the straight line of the P is animating right now while this part of the P is animating on, is I can just duplicate this layer, and then I'm going to delete the group 1 from this one and go into here and delete group 2. So basically now I've just separated those two out, and if I hit U on the keyboard to see my keyframes, I can just stagger these. So maybe the line comes first and then the round part of the P comes second. So they're a little bit staggered now. So then you just want to repeat this basic process on all the rest of your layers so that everything is animating in with trim paths. I'm going to do this cooking show style and come back in a second with all of my letters animating in. But first I just want to show you something you can do on letters like the O. So I'm just going to show that one. And then I'm going to go in and I'll just paste those trim paths again. And then I'm going to go toggle down into my trim paths. And notice how the O is starting from the right side over here. What if I wanted it to start at the top? I can use this offset value to adjust where my line is along the path. So I'll just bring it up to about here. And now you can see it starts at the top and goes around. So another thing I can do is animate the line moving while it's animating on. So I'm just going to set a keyframe for the offset and then go a little bit forward in time. I'm not going to go all the way to this keyframe right now because I want to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm just going to drag this offset value to the right a little. You can see that moves the line along the path. And then I'm going to line up these two keyframes that I made on the offset with the end keyframes. So let's see what this looks like. So you can see that as it's animating on, it's also moving a little bit. So that just makes your animation a little bit more interesting. So I've animated all of my layers, and I just want to point out a couple of things to you. So the first thing is on these rays, each ray has multiple pieces, so I set the trim paths to trim multiple shapes individually. And then I had to make sure that the direction of these was the right direction so that they would animate from the inside out. And for some of the layers, I actually had to rearrange the layer order of these two groups, because now you can see that I'm going to have the far one animate in first and then the close one. So take note that the layer order here matters for how your lines will animate in if you have the trim path set to individually. So right now, all of my ray layers come in at the same time, and I actually want to stagger them. So I'm going to show you how I can do that really quickly. And I think I'm going to stagger them from the right side to the left, because you see this Explore Colorado animate in kind of from left to right. And then this nice like arc on the R and the E, it's kind of going back up. So it's kind of pointing your eye towards the sun. So I think it would be cool if I had the ray start over here, animate this way, and then I'm going to have Colorado animate in from left to right again. And so that kind of just like leads your eye all the way around the whole piece. Kind of makes like a nice spiral shape that your eye is going to follow when you're watching this animation. And one quick thing is that I've color coded my layers, and you can do that really easily by just clicking on the colored box on your timeline, and then you can choose any of these colors from the list. So to stagger these ray layers, I'm going to select the first one, then hit Shift and select the last one. And the order that you select these does matter. So make sure that whatever you select first, you want to animate in first. So the first thing I need to do is trim these layers so that they only last one frame. So I'm going to hit Option and the right bracket key to trim them to one frame each. Then I'm going to right click, go to Keyframe Assistant, Sequence Layers, and hit OK. And you can see that it's staggered all of my layers in this nice waterfall. And I don't actually want them to just last one frame each, so I'm going to drag out all of the layers to last the full length of my timeline. And now you can see that they're staggered when they animate in.